Hello everyone and welcome to a most impressive game from round 1 of the Goldmoney Asian Rapid preliminaries. It's the 7th event of the $1.6 million Champions Chess Tour, the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, and we have a game between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen. So the game has a lot of twists, it has a very exciting opening, it has it all, so let's check it out, and we're gonna discuss what's happening in the tournament at some later rounds. But as you all know, this tournament, basically is the return of Hou Yifan to chess. She's been away from the chess world for some time, but now she returned, and we're very excited to see how she will do. So we will cover some of her games with great pleasure. So let's check it out. Alireza with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5 by Magnus, and now knight to c3. This is the Vienna game, and is something that Alireza often employs in these top tier tournaments. It's basically playing the king's gambit, but with a sort of a safer king's gambit, but it offers a very exciting play, especially if black also wants to play a little bit aggressive. So here Magnus goes knight to f6, bishop to c4, and now bishop to c5. You could go for this knight captures on e4, but it's basically just quick way to equalize, which not something that Magnus is interested in, because okay, now if you capture with the knight, then we can play d5, but of course white will play queen to h5, now threaten checkmate, and then we're gonna see a nice knight to d6, defending f7, attacking the bishop here, and now you win back your pawn. So queen captures, we can trade the queens, captures, and then bishop goes back to b3, and black has this weird knight on d6. You're gonna have to waste the tempo to get it away from there, then you can push your pawn and continue the game. But it's nothing Magnus would be interested in playing in such a top tier event. So here bishop to c5, and now d3. We have d6, both players just playing normal moves, and f4 now. Here we have it, almost the king's gambit. We have knight to c6, knight to f3, and now a6 by Magnus. We have b3, not allowing this to come with tempo. Then you can even play this, attack the knight, and then good things might happen for black. So bishop to b3, and now h6, and this h6 here is a new move, so already as of move 7 we have a completely new game. So let's see how Alireza deals with this. We have queen to e2. Now he wants to play bishop to e3. As long as this bishop is here, white cannot castle. So bishop to g4 by Magnus, and now f captures on e5. We have d captures on e5, and now bishop to e3, countering black's dark square bishop here. We have knight to d4, and now there's a double attack on this knight, and there's an attack on the queen. So the queen has to move. Queen to f2, and now bishop captures on f3, g captures, and knight to h5. Magnus now ruins Alireza's kingside pawn structure, and now he's preparing to bring the other knight to f4, and then the two knights will be most impressive here. So Alireza castles queenside, and now knight to f4, and that's just too many knights here in Alireza's half of the board. So Magnus, Alireza is maybe considering removing one of them, but for the moment just king to b1, a nice prophylactic move with the king, so you don't have to worry about any bishop captures on e3 in the future coming with check. So knight captures on b3, it's a very strong light square bishop, and now while you can capture with the a pawn, Alireza decides to take off as many pieces away from the board. So bishop captures on c5, knight captures, queen captures, and now Magnus plays queen to d6, and he feels very happy. He was able to avoid all the complications of the Vienna game. He's now going to trade queens, and he's going to play a very pleasant endgame. So Alireza accepts. We have queen captures on d6, c captures on d6, and now d4. Of course, you have to play this. You don't want this pawn stuck here. We have queenside castles now by Magnus, and now rook to d2. Now this rook can come to d1, and you can put more pressure along the d file. We have knight back to e6. Now Magnus puts pressure on the d4 pawn, and knight to e2. Alireza defends the d4 pawn one more time. We have rook h to f8. Now Magnus preparing to strike in the center with f5, and now d5. Alireza closes the center, but this gives Magnus the opportunity to activate his pieces. So knight to g5 now, attacking this pawn here. We have rook to d3, defending, but now knight to h3, now threatening knight to f2 to pick up one of the rooks. And the situation on the clock is now Alireza 3 minutes, and Magnus 4 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock. So Although Magnus spent a bit more time in the opening, now he caught up, and now it's Alireza who is actually down on time. So here we have rook to c1. Now this doesn't really do anything, and f5 continuing with the plan, attacking white's strong center. We have c4, and now f captures on e4. We have f captures on e4. This exposes the attack from Alireza's rook to the knight on h3, but now rook to f2. Magnus is very, very happy to trade this, as now his rook is also very active. So here, if you capture, for example, captures, you attack the e4 pawn. White would have to defend with something like this, and then just rook f8, you're bringing the other rook to f2, and then it's going to be a problem defending this, if you allow such a thing. So another thing you could do, and this is by far the best for Alireza, it's not what happened in the game, is c5. c5 is the move you want to play. Now after d captures on c5, we're going to play rook captures on c5 with check, and after the king moves, now we trade knights, but now it's a bit different because now this rook can defend the pawn, and you don't have to commit to this rook to the defense of your pawn. Now you can bring this rook, for example, to c3, have your rooks nicely doubled here. Anything is possible. But okay, after Carlsen's rook to f2, we have knight to c3 by Alireza, and now Magnus just picks up a pawn. And now the problem is, Magnus is up a pawn. Alireza's position is a bit more active due to the advanced pawn structure here, but if Magnus can start pushing those kingside pawns, it's going to be very, very difficult for Alireza to stop them. So here c5, Alireza wants to open up lines as quickly as possible, and now knight to f4, not rushing with any captures here. We have rook d to d1, and now comes king to b8 by Magnus. So what do you play here? Now you don't have to worry about this rook eyeing your king for any longer, and the problem for Alireza is that he's down to 1 minute on the clock. It's 1 minute for Alireza, 2 minutes for Magnus, and here we have c6. This is the most active move, and it's the one Alireza plays. We have rook to c8, and now comes knight to a4, and here it's a very interesting position, and here the position requires a most precise move, well, as they're both very low on time, I'm just going to show it to you, but here a move that's most impressive is king to c7. King to c7, again going in front of the rook and stopping this knight to b6 idea, and here if, for example, c captures on b7, now you're just going to play king captures on b7, and again there's no knight to b6, and if captures, then you're very happy here. You don't have to worry about anything here, and you can just start pushing your king side pawns. And on the other hand, after king to c7, if we see something like rook to c3 with the idea of doubling up, well, then b5 traps the knight. And I mean, it's the point is we want to keep the knight away from the b6 square. But Magnus here, and here Magnus spent 1 minute and 21 seconds on his next move. He played rook to e2. He went for the e4 pawn, but Alireza seems to be ready for this, as he immediately played knight to b6. So king to c7 kind of was needed here to stop this knight from infiltrating. We have rook to c7 by Magnus, now knight to d7 with check. King to a7, and now rook to c4. Now Alireza wants to start pushing these pawns here, open up the position, and maybe even checkmate Carlsen's king, because now with the position being as it is, the knight covers b6 and b8, and if the a file opens up, this could be checkmate. So let's see if he can do it. Magnus says, nope, that's way off. I'm just gonna start pushing my passed pawn, because that's how games are won. We have rook to g1 by Alireza, going after this pawn, and now Magnus has a clear win, so feel free to pause the video and win this game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on completely ignoring this pawn and doing what you do best, and that's pushing the pawn. So congratulations to everyone who found h4, as this is now just winning. Now h3 is guarded by the knight, h2 is guarded by the rook, and there will be no defense against this pawn. Point is that you do not want to defend the pawn. After the pawn is captured, we're going to play h3, rook h7, we're going to play h2, and now we're threatening rook e1 check, king here, and then we're going to bring a queen into the game as our rook covers the h1 square. So white would have to defend with rook to c1, but now we play rook to g2. Now, again, what do you play here? There's not much for white to play. Whatever white plays, we're just going to play knight d3. Now attack the rook. There's also a double attack on the b2 pawn, and it's just a completely winning position for black. If rook c3, we can even play knight f2. Now we can just, we cover the h1 square. We also attack this pawn, so this rook has to go back. We're going to start picking up the other pawns. Now we create another pass pawn, and it's just an unplayable position for white. So after rook to g1, Alireza was able to convince Magnus into seeing ghosts, and Magnus played g6. He defended his pawn, but that's one valuable tempo that he gave away. So Alireza starts pushing on the queen side. He plays a4, and now Magnus plays h4. Now he wants to play h3, h2, but Alireza gets b4 in, and now slowly but surely we are getting that what we discussed. So here we have b6 by Magnus, and now comes b5. We have a5. Magnus, of course, not interested in opening up the position, and now it seems that the position is completely closed, and Magnus can just continue winning the position by pushing his pass pawn, but Alireza says nope, and he plays knight captures on e5. So what do you play here? The knight cannot be captured if if these two pawns start marching forward. Then it's just game over. You can easily just win the game. There's not much black can do to stop this. So after knight captures on e5, Magnus just continues pushing. We have h3, and now rook to h1. And now Magnus happily gives the piece back. Knight captures on d5. He says, nope, you take my piece. And Alireza could definitely grab this. If captures, then rook captures, then he can capture on h3. The material is equal. Alireza's position is better. Probably Magnus would be able to defend, but it's hard to say. They are both very low on time. Anything could happen. So instead, after knight captures on d5, we have knight captures on g6 by Alireza, and now knight to e3. And now, what do you play here? Alireza says, all right, my rook is under attack. Rook to c3. Now, if the knight moves, we can always pick up the h3 pawn. So, knight to g4 by Magnus, and now comes knight to f4. So, what do you play here? The rook is under attack. The pawn is under attack. What do you play? Well, here Magnus picks up the e4 pawn, now attacks the knight here, and now you can finally eliminate this pass pawn. But is this the best thing to do? It's hard to say. Feel free to pause the video here and now win the game for Alireza while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not listening to my suggestion and grabbing the h3 pawn. And for those of you who decided to go to d5, then congratulations, you are a most excellent player. So here, knight to d5, this is what Alireza played, and that's a huge problem for Magnus, because the rook is under attack and you can't move the rook. If you move the rook, then we get rook captures on h3, and how do you defend against this? There's simply no defending this. It's just too terrible of a position. For example, knight e5, you can try and bring some defenders into the game, just check, and after the king moves, we're going to bring the knight here with check, and then king b8, and then rook to b7 will be checkmate. So that's a huge problem. So after knight d5, Magnus played knight to f2. He said, all right, now I'm going to attack your rook, but Alireza just captured on c7. Magnus captured on h1, and here we have rook captures on h3. And it was in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game on move 45, as there is nothing more to be done here. Problem is that the knight is under attack, and it doesn't matter whether you defended or you move the knight. The plan is the same. After the knight moves, for example, knight f2, we're going to play rook to h8, and now you see that all of these squares are covered. We reach the position from the thumbnail, and that there is no defending against rook to a8 checkmate. So Magnus, of course, saw this, and after rook to h3, he resigned the game. So he defended well against the Vienna game, but incredible as it is, Alireza once again brings the Vienna to a top-tier tournament, challenges the world champion in all-time formats to a Vienna game, and wins the game. So that's how you play good chess. So congratulations to Alireza, and hope you guys enjoyed this game. It was a really, really wild one. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jorge Campos, David Trainer, Kevin Stormeyer, Paige Myers, and Chingyi Chan for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this very nice tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.